In a world with food more than humans, the world still has persons hungry and dying of hunger. Why is that so? Well, due to issues affecting food security, like the physical availability of food security, the financial access to food, the utilization of food, persons are being seriously affected. Issues on physical availability. Farmers around the world produce enough food to feed 10 billion people, while the global population is at 7.6 billion. But still, 690 million people go hungry, and the production of food is climbing rapidly. So, what causes hunger around the world? If there's more than enough food for everyone, poverty and inequality. Food prices have skyrocketed all around the world since before the pandemic. So some persons really don't make enough money to ensure their food security because they can't provide for 3 square meals per day. In reality, the bulk of industrial produced gain crops goes to biofuels and confined animal feedlots rather than food for the billion hungry. Yes, there's a rumor going about as they plan to double food production by 2050. But currently, we already make enough food to feed the world population 2 times over. So, this thought would only apply if we continue to prioritize the growing population of livestock and automobiles over hungry people. When we look at the map below and study it, majority of the country in the dark red or close to dark, which has 25 to 35% of hungry people, we notice these countries either suffer from politics, war, for example, Afghanistan has a very rich soil for agriculture and mining, but yet still they're hungry. This is simple because of all the corruption they have to deal with. Another example is Haiti. They are terrorized by harsh weather. Like many other developing countries, they are prone to drought and harsh weather changes due to global warming. And this is one of the chief reasons developing countries find it hard.
Good morning again, everyone. I will be taking us through the financial aspects of food security. Financial access to food can be defined as a household's capability to have access to a moderate quantity of food to sustain themselves. This can be done through different means such as purchasing, barter, borrowing, or food assistance gifts. Food access is the dimension of food security that consists of expenditure, income, and the buying capacity of individuals. A few indicators of financial access to food are meal frequency, food prices, wage rate, employment rate, per capita food consumption, etc. Simon AG 2012 states, it must be understood that food products being available but not affordable would lead to a situation of insecurity. Food insecurity considers circumstances over the past years, sometimes months. Sometimes access to food may be physically available near the consumer that has the required resources to access the produce, but there may be social cultural barriers limiting their access, such as gender or social reasons. So, is there enough food currently available? Well, to set the all important stage, a critical question is whether current global food supplies can satisfy food needs. One traditional indicator to guide this assessment is the amount of cereal stocks held globally and their liquidity. That is, whether they are made available for procurement on the international scale. At the beginning of the 2020 COVID-19 crisis, cereal stocks hovered around a multi-year high of about 850 million tons. In absolute terms, they were nearly twice as high as at the beginning of the year 2007 and 2008 crisis, and even relative to utilization, they had reached levels far above those registered in 2007 and 2008. These high stocks should provide a solid buffer against adverse shock, such as, for instance, a bad weather event in the 2020 and 2021 growing season. While important, absolute levels of stocks are not all that matters for buffer capacity. Equally significant is the distribution of stocks over countries. over exporters and importers, and notably their concentration over major stores. So, who is most affected by insecurity? Many people are highly vulnerable to hunger and malnutrition. Some people who may be affected by a lack of access to food would be those who live in an area recently affected by drought, those who live in or close to a war zone, single-headed households. Often single mothers are worst affected by as they have to look after children and provide economically for the entire household. Households where one parent is disabled, those who have no access to water for market gardening in the off seasons, those with no access to money to buy things like animals or even fruit trees to complement their other agricultural activities, tend to be very vulnerable. Why are people struggling with financial access to food? Well, people don't choose food security. A lack of food security is forced upon them. They typically live in an extreme poverty because, after all, food is one of our most basic needs. Families then grow up without access to food and are therefore unable to provide for their families. When nobody steps in to help, those people live with diseases, hunger, thirst, and pain. Thank you. I will now hand you over to Ms. Jacinta Edwards with food utilization.
The utilization of food. What is the utilization of food? Proper food processing and storage techniques are employed. Adequate knowledge of nutrition and child care techniques exists and is applied, and adequate health and sanitation services exist. Critical issues to consider in addressing food utilization with a value chain approach. These approaches are income nutrition linkage, value chain selection, food safety, complementary intervention. Income nutrition linkage. Households will not always spend additional earnings on food. Value chain initiatives should seriously question whether increasing income will be sufficient to address the food challenges. Value chain selection. Opportunities for local processing, thereby creating savings in food costs and time, offering people great control over their diets and better nutritional value. Food safety. Demand for perishable food rises with growing incomes, and urbanization increases the distance between producers and consumers. Therefore, there is a greater potential for food contamination. Food safety plays a major role in effective food utilization, as the consumption of unsafe food and water can scientifically comes to malnutrition. Complementary intervention. Understanding where the absence of sanitation, water, and health services causes negative food security impact is important for determining whether these represent actual barriers to improve food security. Communities being unable to produce their own food. Unable to produce food. Poor harvest handling. The nutritional value of food may be very significant from the point of harvest to when it is consumed. With urbanization and rising incomes, individuals are eating greater quantities of processed foods and increasingly rely on others to mill the crops. 2. Complementary interventions. Effective sanitation of water and health services reduce the likelihood of illness and ensure individuals are able to observe the nutrition in the food they eat. Thank you.
Food security is when persons have reliable access to sufficient nutritious food to support a healthy lifestyle. This now brings us to the end of our documentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did, and I hope you learned a lot.